Hello, guys. I got on Kristopher today. He runs a laundromat in the Balkans called Tito's Iron Fist. I just find his story and his business really interesting, and we're going to be interviewing him today. I'm joined by our new co-host, Henry. If you guys want to introduce yourselves.
Hello, I'm Henry.
Sure,
I
go
write
ahead.
things on Substack sometimes, and I think some people read them. And excited to be here today.
And then Kristopher.
Yeah, I'm Christopher. I'm originally from the US, but I've been here in Bosnia for the last 3 years, and I founded this laundry, Tito's Iron Fist. So we'll talk about that.
Nice, nice. So I'll ask you a question. Henry will ask you a question. Starting off first, how did you start the idea of like a Tito inspired laundromat? Like, what was that move from America to Bosnia like?
It wasn't my original plan to start a laundromat named after Tito, or I left America like 5 years ago after Bernie's second election because I don't see much future there. And I was traveling for a while. I came here as a tourist about 4 years ago, and I liked it here. I ended up coming back the next summer to learn to study Bosnian. And there was already a laundry here in Sarajevo that I met the owner, and it turned out she was quitting, and it just happened that I got there and she was quitting, and I said, "Well, I'll buy it from you." And anyway, I bought the laundry, and um but I didn't know what I would name it. I mean, I'd already become radicalized with the Bernie campaign, and um realizing that like we can't reform the system. So um anyway, I bought the laundry, and then I thought, like Tito's Iron Fist would be such a great name for a laundromat, and it just kind of was gradual. Like I put up a flag, and then just kind of started decorating it, and yeah, gradually it became had a theme. Um,
Hmm.
I don't know what else.
That's
What else
nice.
can I say?
It
Um,
just kind of came together.
yeah. Would you describe
Yeah,
yourself as like a Titoist or like a socialist or like how do you personally feel about Tito?
I would describe myself as a Marxist Leninist, and I really think I wouldn't say Titoist. I don't really like these kind of sectional, what do you call it, sectarian identities. I mean, Tito was a Marxist Leninist, and uh, so, and in some way, it's just like because I'm here, Tito is something I can use to get the. I want it. I don't want it just to be a shrine to Tito. I want to make propaganda. I want to, and I think Tito's useful for that because he's less smeared than like the Soviet Union. People have a more positive image of him. So yeah, I can use Tito to make socialist propaganda.
Very cool. Very cool. Henry?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely a good point in terms of, people get kind of caught up in like what ideology to put in their Twitter bio or whatever, and it really just doesn't matter so much what the label is. But in terms of Tito himself, anecdotally, everyone I've talked to from the former Yugoslavia almost universally has a really high view of him. And oftentimes you'll hear him talked about as a figure who really held Yugoslavia together, and that his death really spelled, the end for Yugoslavia, and that he kind of managed, nationalist tensions within the country, just by virtue of him being the leader. Do you think there's any truth to that? Or do you think there were just other issues that led to the breakup of Yugoslavia that didn't really have much to do with him not being in the leadership? Um, and do you think that that's kind of a great man view of Yugoslavia and, not really materialist? And, what are your thoughts on
Well,
that, given that he's so
yeah.
beloved?
Yeah, no, that's many questions.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I mean, he was very much respected because he was a war hero. You know, he defeated the fascists, and that's why people really respected him. And that was a big reason why he was able to hold things together because the partisan struggle was a multinational struggle. Like it united all the different ethnic groups fighting against the fascists. And the myth was kind of that the fascism was an outsider force, but in some sense it was a civil war. And but the ideology didn't recognize that, and yeah, that might have become a problem after Tito because then that kind of reasserted itself. But I think the fact that under Yugoslavia, the whole anti-fascist ideology, it didn't matter what your religion or your ethnicity was, and because of that, like they could identify as Yugoslavians, and there was a lot of intermarriage between the different ethnic groups, and yeah, that really fell apart and very tragic. But I did think Tito, the fact that that he was such a war hero, he was so respected, and he he really did hold things together. I don't think that's just a great man fallacy or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's really interesting that you point out like the collaborationist element too. Um, and that
For
kind of
sure.
myth. I wasn't aware of that. That's really interesting.
Yeah. I'm interested in because I know that Bosnia and Yugoslavia, especially after Tito had a big, just ugly, brutal conflict. Like how do Bosnians view Tito?
In Bosnia, it's one of he's very missed. Like I would say Bosnia is one of the most positive has the most positive feelings towards Tito, especially among older generations. It's very generational. Um, Younger generations, because their parents fought in the war, they became more nationalist and they taught their children. So the more nationalist you are, the more anti-Tito you are.
Mm,
Um, it's also the fact that for some reason there's a myth that socialism equals atheism, and because in the Balkans nationalism is so tied to religion,
Mm.
that's why younger people tend to be more negative towards socialism. It's an interesting inversion where usually you would expect young people to be more progressive, but in the Balkans, it feels like younger people are more nationalist, more religious, and more anti-communist.
mm,
I
mm.
don't know.
Yeah, I find that's like the weird dichotomy between the East and the West, like, especially the post-Soviet world, where in the West, like all the boomers are like anti-Soviet and all the kids are communists, but in the East, all the boomers are like pro-Soviet and all the kids are anti-communist. It's like I don't know, it's a weird dichotomy. Um
Yeah, it's very true. And they don't really learn about it in school. You know, that's the unfortunate thing is they just learn whatever their parents told them. And the younger generations, their parents fought in this horrible war in the 90s, which of course made people, it really set things back in so many ways. Like, and that's a big challenge here for me. Like, it's not that it's very hard to it's not a lack of class consciousness, it's almost a negative class consciousness, if that makes any sense, where people if there's a lack of class consciousness, you can educate people. But when people have when they've rejected the socialist legacy, then it's just impossible to get through to them in any way. So yeah, it can be very unfortunate.
Now you need to wait until there's a certain level of disillusionment.
mm. uh,
Yeah.
could you delve a little
The
bit
problem,
further into like what you mean by negative class consciousness?
Hmm.
right? Like it's not just a lack of solidarity, but this idea that everybody wants to become a capitalist. They want to make money but not do any work. You know, they want to have a business, but and there's no solidarity here. It's like everybody is out for themselves, and I don't know. It's just like this really strong capitalist ideology. That's really
Mm, mm.
at the same time. at the same time, there's a nostalgia, which is very contradictory because people, it's like there's a nostalgia for Tito, a really strong nostalgia for Tito, and yet this nationalism, this like very this religious ideology, and I don't know, it's like it's complicated.
Do you
Right.
think there's an element of, because I've talked to some people from Romania who've kind of seemed like this to me, and I mean, I don't obviously, it's a different region, but that in Eastern Europe there's this sense, and the Balkans is the sense of like, well, we all just need to become Germany, we need to kind of become like the EU countries, kind of, become like France and England, EU, which are on the surface, wealthier places. Do you think there's an element of that?
Hmm. I don't know. That's an interesting, it is like Bosnia is a Western colony, whether, it's and even in the Dayton Constitution or whatever the agreements, there was like a provision that Bosnia should become integrated into the West. Like, so it's almost like these things happen without any democratic input. But yeah, I don't know. Like,
Hmm. Well,
yeah, I'm not sure how to answer that.
one common sentiment I see a lot by Eastern European anti-communists is like almost an inability to understand why Western Europe was like so developed compared to like the Soviet Union. And it's sort of the just like sort of presented as the failure of communism. Like, why can't we be like France? Like, why can't we be like Germany? Do you ever see that in any way, like a sort of constant comparison to like the West as sort of supposed failure of the socialist system?
I don't think so. I think Yugoslavia was quite different. It wasn't behind the Eastern Bloc. It was much more open, and they had the strongest passport in the world, the red passport, that which they could go to the West, they could work in Germany, and you also had a lot of Western businesses doing partnerships here, like outside of Sarajevo. There was a VW factory, and yeah, but their standard of living was quite high here because Tito was a good politician, and he was always kind of playing the East and West off against each other. So they tend to be very proud of how well they were doing, how their high standard of living. Like, so I would say I would, and they had a lot of more like material things. They were able to go to like the West, and it's a different story than like Estonia or some other Eastern Bloc places.
I see.
Okay.
I see.
And so, or sorry, go ahead. I
No,
was
go
going to
ahead.
ask about I wanted to ask about, I guess, the legacy of the non-aligned movement, because that's obviously something about Tito that honestly I've always personally had a lot of respect for, and his, he and Nehru and the other leaders of the non-aligned movement. And you mentioned, like, alluded to playing the East and West off of each other, but do you think there's a bit of a legacy of that there in terms of a, you could say like within the region of the former Yugoslavia, there's, certainly national sentiments and political complexities there, but there is sort of a view that, well, we shouldn't, be super anti-Russia or super anti-EU or super pro, you know what I mean? There's kind of some legacy of the non-aligned movement there, or not really?
Well, I mean, the Bosnian passport can still go to Cuba without a visa. So, and Serbia also. There's a lot of legacies here. Some some groups were more into it than others. Like Croatians tended to be very against it because they thought we are Europeans, and why are we associating with African? It's like, but maybe there's a kind of more open-mindedness. I don't know. Like, I don't know how where you would see that legacy exactly.
Right. So you're an American. You're in Bosnia. How has the local community sort of responded to you and Tito's Iron Fist? I mean, I can imagine to a little bit of extent it's kind of exotic or a little bit funny that this guy comes in from America and he's like promoting a former communist leader of your country and it has like Yugoslav flags everywhere and things like that. Uh, so how's the local community responded?
Yeah, I was quite nervous, because I wasn't sure how people would feel about it. Like, upstairs there's a restaurant with a bunch of older people go. They don't speak any English, and I'm like, how are they going to react to this? But generally, it's been very positive because, like I said, the older generations actually lived under socialism and they have the most positive feelings towards it. But I don't know. I noticed a kind of a sadness in them. Like they really, they really miss it. You know, it's like that they feel, but they feel like the world's moved on. You know, I think my theory is that they're still socialists in their heart. They're still Yugoslavians in their heart, but like they feel the world has moved on, and I think that's the source of the sadness. What else? Like I've been putting stickers around town that have Tito's Iron Fist, and I always see it scratched out. So I don't know who's defacing my stickers, but maybe just some young hooligans. I don't know, but like that's a sign that there's some negativity in the air. Yeah.
But you've never faced.
Nobody's actually come here. Nobody's come here and like started any shit or anything. Nobody's like, I've never had any like hecklers or anything like issues like that. So as long as I'm tolerated, I think that's enough, you know, as long as,
Hmm.
yeah.
Okay. Henry.
It is similar. I had a similar but more specific question. Like, what's your favorite reaction you've had from a customer who wasn't communist? Like
Hmm.
they kind of came in and were sort of, they didn't really, they're a liberal or whatever, but it just kind of had a funny reaction or a funny reaction in general.
Some guy pointed to my Lenin statue. He said, "Do you know how many people that man has killed?" I'm like, I don't know. Tell me. Like, yeah, I don't know. I can't think of something off the top of my head like that. I have to think about that. Maybe I'll get back to you on some.
So how do people treat the laundromat? Like, I know you got theory books all over the place. Do they just like do their laundry? They hang out. Do local leftist groups come in, or do people just come in and out very fast? And they're like, oh, cool, like Yugoslavia flags. Like, like is it is how is the space treated usually?
Well, when they come in, like, you can really see their eyes light up because it's really like there's just something really magical about it. Like I've really created a atmosphere here, and that's great that they're inspired. And I hope that because they're inspired, they'll want to learn more. Like I think we have to first agitate people, and then they'll want to learn more. But but yeah, I think like there's so much in Bosnia, like so much focused on like really negative history, like war and genocide and siege of Sarajevo, and there's the tourism is really it can really make you depressed. And then you come here and you see something that makes you smile. And yeah, I want to show that there's like history here that's not just all war and horror, but there's actually something very positive that needs to be remembered. And I don't know, I think when people come here and their eyes light up, and I think yeah, it's a good thing. So I don't know, did I answer your question? You asked me like how do people treat the space? I don't think I explained that I actually do the laundry. Like people don't do it themselves, so
Oh.
they come, they give me their clothes, I measure it, and so they're not really like hanging out here. I'm mostly just kind of watching YouTube, and but you know, I'm always happy to. The way I see it is I'm like a resource. Like some people don't want to have a political experience; they just want to do their laundry. So you know, if they come here and they just want to do laundry, but I'm here as a resource. So if they want to start having a conversation, like let's talk and let's exchange ideas. Like, and I want it to be like, how can I want your input too? Like I want how can I improve this? How can I run a business that's like true that is like true to socialism? Like I don't know, like I'm trying, but I can always I want more leftists to. The problem is like I thought that they would find me. I thought the people in Sarajevo that were into this would find me, but like I've been kind of disappointed that there's so few people that want to come here and like organize with me, because I don't really feel it's my place to be like too active. Like I want to find people here that are doing good work and maybe work with them, but I don't want to just like go to a protest and wave around a communist flag or something, because I don't feel like that would be my place as a foreigner here. You know what I mean? So
Yeah, yeah, I understand that you have to maintain like sort of like an aspect of respectability. I think
sure, yeah.
yeah, yeah, especially like I don't know, even if okay, like we know that communism was right, even if we know that things like that, like we know what it was compared to capitalism, things like that. There is a little bit of a privilege when you're talking to like people whose like parents have actually experienced communism and then the collapse of the Soviet Union or the Yugoslavia, the breakup of it. So I know that it's a very fine line you have to tread. That
Yeah.
there, yeah, yeah. Henry,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I was wondering if there are. I suppose Yugoslavia was so unique, but do you think that there are any countries today, or if not exactly, what country do you think most closely aligns with Tito's interpretation of communism? And what country today do you think Tito would approve the most of, I guess?
Wow, that's a very difficult and very theoretical question. So I don't know. Like, I mean, there are just 5 countries today that are still run by a communist party. You know, you have Cuba, you have Vietnam, Laos, and China and North Korea. So, of those 5, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that? Like,
I would say perhaps China because China has adopted sort of like a pseudo market socialism. So has Vietnam. Like I think to some extent they have done like a very similar system to what Tito had in Yugoslavia. But obviously
yeah,
it's different because of the regional aspects. It's practiced a little bit differently.
sure. The way that sorry, yeah. No, the way that China's like welcomed like Western development, like that's similar to how Tito like we had partnerships with Western companies like VW and with like the whatever the feature, with cars and other things like s- similar. It could be
Yeah.
compared to China.
Do do people still drive Yugo cars there? Are the Yugos still huge or not?
They're rare. They're
They're
kind of
rare.
like you're part of like a special club if you have a Yugo. It's like there's some guy here that gives tours in a Yugo. It's called the Yugo tour. They're different people that give Yugo tours like in Belgrade here and Mostar. But I went with him and like people were like really waving and really happy to see it. But it's pretty rare to see. You see a ton of VWs because, like I said, the factory was here. Yeah,
It's kind of like
Yugos.
part of it's kind of like a part of a nostalgia kind of thing.
Exactly. Yeah, there's a lot of these things that are these symbols of like these material symbols of the past. And yeah, you have a lot of like cafes and things throughout the Yugoslavian space that are kind of using this nostalgia, but I feel like they're kind of using it just to sell things, and it's just nostalgia for nostalgia's sake. It's not actually what I want to distinguish my laundry is by being forward looking, not just backwards looking, but also thinking about socialism moving forward. Like, um, why is it still relevant today? So yeah, I don't want it just to be a shrine to Tito. I want it to be like a monument to the socialist ideas. So
Absolutely.
even though it's a shrine to Tito, but I don't know, it looks like a shrine to Tito. But I want it to not just be that's what I say.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Do you think anybody's been radicalized by like experiences with you and your shop, or just chatting to you, or like even just like perusing, or do you think it's more like people are just curious? Do you think you've gotten the ball rolling in anybody's life?
I would like to think so. I mean, because I think that as leftists, as socialists, I think our main job is to educate people, right? And I think the art of this, the the atmosphere. I think that inspires people. And like I said, I think when you agitate people, then you can educate them. But you have to first like inspire them, then they want to learn more. And so I hope that I can be a part of that. Like, I offer books to people. Yeah, but I mean, I don't know. How can I wouldn't say that I've turned somebody from a rabid anti-communist into a socialist, but I mean, I hope that I can be a part of that conveyor belt, of that pipeline to a more radical politics. And I meet people where they're at, and then I try to be kind of Socratic. Like, if they have some opinion about socialism, maybe I'll ask them, well, what do you think socialism actually means? Like, and then we can have a conversation, and maybe I can plant some seeds in their minds, or just challenge some of their assumptions in some way. So I mean, I can't do too much, but I can hopefully just in some small way educate people.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the most important part. I mean, just being something that gets the ball rolling, or as somebody's on their journey, just giving them that gentle push. Especially, I think, like, when you're just a normal human being and like you have a relationship with somebody, it's so much easier to convince them of socialism, because like even
Yeah.
even if they disagree with you, it's like, well, I know that Christopher or Henry is a good person. Like, even if I
Yeah,
disagree with him,
right. Yeah.
like,
Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Also, the way that I'm so public about it, I'm not like ashamed. I'm not hiding. I'm right here, just like socialist laundry written outside. Like, you know, uh, people, yeah, like people aren't used to seeing like somebody just like so openly socialist. So I don't know. Maybe that will make other people more willing to, I don't know, express that. If they feel that way, maybe they'll be more open about it, and hopefully that inspires other people. I think it can be contagious, and yeah,
Absolutely. Absolutely. These other shops that like sort of use Yugoslavia memorabilia, like how common are there? Are they? Because I know there's a couple in Russia that will like also use sort of like, and Transnistria, like they'll use like, or
yeah,
Transnistria.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, they'll use like
Yeah.
Soviet memorabilia. They'll use like, I don't know, like they'll be even in China to some extent. There's like restaurants with like red guards that will serve you like waitresses dressed up as red guards. There's like portraits of Stalin and Lenin. Do you
Yeah.
do you sort of see these as like horrible? Like they're sort of against the communist ideal. They're like selling us back the revolution and they're taking our aesthetics, or do you see anything positive in them? Like they're sort of normalizing socialism.
Yeah, I don't know. I have mixed feelings about that, because it's like it's good that they're positive feelings, but it's like, how are you? What are you actually doing? Like, it's just, I don't know. It's just kind of empty nostalgia, and I've tried really hard to kind of build ties, build to collaborate with other like museums, for example. Like, if you take my flyer and I will take your flyer, then we can both do better. And there's just been kind of a coldness where nobody really wants to work together. And it's like, where's the solidarity? Like, you know, and even here, there's like an anti-fascist society and in my same building, but what do? They just like commemorate Yugoslavian holidays. They go to like monuments, but like, where what are you actually doing to fight for socialism? Like, it's just a very backwards looking kind of thing, and that's very frustrating for me.
Mhm.
It,
Um,
it feels like a common part of a common thread, and although maybe it's changing in some ways in the United States today, but across a lot of the world, a real common thread seems to be a disconnect from the working class, and turning it into a um like more of a book club, like you're saying, like book club kind of social group, instead of um, you know, trying to desperately connect with like what are the conditions of the working class? How can we build trust as representatives of working class interests. Instead, it's more superficial. Do you think that's a more specific aspect of the problem?
Sure, yeah. Like there's been a protest movement for Palestine, and in some way that's a very positive sign because like you have a lot of kind of spontaneous people going out on the streets, but yeah, but then it becomes this, you could use that to build consciousness of like how all these struggles are connected with like, and ultimately how imperialism and capitalism are connected, but instead you see it kind of taken in this more reactionary direction of like nationalism and comparing like the Palestinian genocide to the Bosnian genocide, and then it becomes this kind of anti-Serbian protest, and it's like, I don't know, it's like it's very hard to build that, to connect it to like, it just feels like all the roots of the problems here in the Balkans, the reason why people are not living as well as they used to is because of the nationalism.
Mm.
And like, but they're going to that as a solution when it, you know, we should be going towards the Yugoslavian brotherhood and unity where it didn't matter what your, that was secondary, your religion, your nationality, you know, because it really was a worker state. It was based on, you know, I think the main message that people, that would really help would be to realize that we're workers, like first, that workers of the world have more in common with each other. And that's a hard message to get across here because like I said, there's this negative solidarity, there's this negative class consciousness where people have rejected these ideas. They've rejected brotherhood and unity, and it's hard because like, yeah, and when communism, when socialism is just seen as atheism, and yeah, I don't have a lot of hope, to be honest. It can be very, very frustrating, but at least I don't think I'm going to lead a revolution here, but at least I'm talking to a lot of tourists, and I think that's where I can have some positive influence because most of my customers here are Western tourists, and they've come here with an open mind and they want to learn, and I'm here to teach them. So yeah,
Yeah.
It
Oh no, go ahead, Henry.
oh, sorry, it's quick, but um, like you said, it is easy to feel like there is a lot of reasons to be demoralized, but also I think especially the history of the anti-monarchist movement is fascinating because it went on for hundreds of years and ultimately culminated in like a successful, with the exception of like Saudi Arabia and Brunei, I guess, like complete transformation of society. But it took a long time of people doing really thankless work that they never saw the results of. And in many ways, society is changing so much faster today as a result of technology. So, it's not that there's the same, oh, there's going to be 1,000 years before anything's going to change. But it does go to show that oftentimes, if you have a scientific framework, you sort of have to trust that there will be a lot of opportunities because the contradictions won't go anywhere. They will
yeah, yeah,
heighten, especially in the West.
for
Yeah.
sure. Yeah,
Um,
I just don't think the revolution's not going to start here. It's an. I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say super quick, like, I think in the post-communist world, especially, a great way to unify these areas was just hyper nationalism. And to some extent, I mean, Marxist Leninist experiments in Eastern Europe, they did make a mistake of like being sort of overly chauvinist occasionally. But once the socialist period ended, that when there was no longer communism or worldwide workers' revolution or things like this to unify nations, all that was left was nationalism and hyper nationalism. And we've seen that especially in like Estonia and Latvia, where like there's been like this very anti-Russian sentiment, and like Russian citizens have been getting like denaturalized, and these are like 60-year-old or 70-year-old people who have been living here for like decades now, and they can't even do the paperwork to like get naturalized again. Um,
Yeah,
so it's very sad what's happened, and I also think the fact that socialism collapsed, right? And of course, as communists, like we know, it was like a very top-down dismantling, due to like contradictions of like I don't know, like contradictions, especially after Stalin, and I'm not sure about the Yugoslavia specifically. I think there was also most likely contradictions with how Tito ran the Yugoslavia. But when socialism collapses, it's no longer an option within the most minds of most workers in this region. They're like, well, obviously that can't work because it collapsed. And they don't know like the reasons that it collapses, like, contradictions or a top down dismantling by a revisionist clique or I don't know, what have you. To them, it's just that socialism collapsed because it's untenable. So now all they have is nationalism and socialism is untenable. And I think that's why it's so hard. Would you say that's why it's so hard for them to imagine any alternative to capitalism?
I mean, it's just the material reality that there's no longer a socialist state that serves the workers. So when you just have these balkanized, nation states, then people, if they want to, they have no other choice, but they have to accept the reality that, yeah, it doesn't matter how we got there. It's just that's like the material reality is that they're these nation states. So I don't know. It's like, how can you have socialism when you have in this situation? I don't know.
Mm,
Mhm.
mm. Yeah, yeah. I think it's very sad. What why do you think if you could lay it at any reason, like why do you think Yugoslavia like collapsed? I know that's a big question, but like what after Tito's death, like what do you think was the big factor?
I think during the Cold War, it was kind of useful to have Yugoslavia as this non-aligned state. You know, both sides thought they could kind of use it for their own purposes. But I think for the West, as long as there was a Soviet Union, then Yugoslavia had some use. But after the fall of the Soviet Union, there's no reason to tolerate a socialist state. So I mean, that's kind of a meta picture of why I think the West intervened. And yeah, I think you'll ask anybody like, why did Yugoslavia end? And yeah, they will say it's the United States. Like that's not a very controversial opinion.
Mm,
Um,
mm. Do you find any like cultural worship of America though? Because I know obviously all across the world, America is looked as like sort of like, especially through Hollywood and things like that, like people all across the world get a very different view of America than us Americans do. And there is a sort of fetishization of American life, especially within regions of the world outside of America, where it's sort of portrayed as like, oh my God, you go there, you put in a little elbow grease and you're like a multimillionaire, like things like that.
yeah. People were kind of surprised, like, why would an American come to Bosnia? Like, you're from California, like the streets are paved in gold, because they've just seen this Hollywoodized image of it. But I don't know. I think things might be changing a little bit, especially nowadays with the craziness that's happening. But yeah, what was I gonna say? I think like Palestine actually had an effect. Well, like during the Bosnian War in the 90s, because the West supported Bosnia, like there is a positive feeling towards America. Uh, but the whole Palestine thing, like in when Biden was elected in 2020, right? There was actually like people driving around honking their horns like they were celebrating because Biden had like played some part in supporting Bosnia during the war. But then with the Palestine and with this like protest movement that's been happening, then I think that's causing a shift in how people think about America.
Mhm.
And yeah, maybe that's a good thing. And I should mention like the whole protest thing is quite extraordinary because
Mm,
what I would say is the general rule here is extreme passivity, like political passivity. And I don't know why that is. I think it's because people realize that they're a colony. Really, if you don't have any power to change things, you're not going to be motivated to try to change things. Like and the way that the Dayton Peace Accords like set up Bosnia, which ended the war, but it really just kind of froze the conflict. It kind of froze things, so nothing can really change here. There's like a three different presidents. It's a really complicated system, and like there's also a UN High Commissioner who's like basically a representative of the West, and he can basically veto anything that happens here. So they're never gonna be able to take their destiny into their own hands. They're never gonna be able to. So I can understand why there's so much passivity here. But yeah, with the Palestine protests, you have people really mass protest on the street, and that's that's a good sign. Like, yeah, maybe it'll change how people perceive the U.S.
Mm, that is.
Do you think?
No, go ahead, Henry.
No, go ahead. Go. No, I went ahead last night.
Okay. What about the America-China conflict? Has that affected anything? Like, do Bosnians have any opinion on that? Do they veer more towards China or America, or is it more so just like whatever? Like, this isn't our concern, especially since they don't exercise any political power whatsoever, especially like being so controlled by the EU. How do they view China?
Yeah, that's very difficult for me to answer because I don't like. Yeah, generally, I don't. I think it's far away for them, and
Hmm.
honestly, yeah, I haven't really discussed this specific topic with any Bosnians. Like I talked to the Bosnians upstairs, but they speak Bosnian. Like my Bosnian isn't at quite the level where I'm discussing these complicated like geopolitical topics with them. So
For sure.
I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to answer that.
For sure. Go ahead, Henry.
Yeah, I was just going to ask. Obviously the like Palestinian struggles like become extremely, extremely horrific and pronounced. Like I guess in 2021, really the whole 21st century it has been, but obviously especially in the last 2 years, and now just recently we've seen like a real kind of ignition within the Kashmir, in occupied Kashmir, and then also of course Ukraine. Like since 2014, it seems like because as the world moves away from the United States being this like sole, super powerful, capitalist country that can just kind of do whatever it wants. Now, not just because of China, but also India and other parts of the world that are gaining a lot of independence and power, economic power. Are you worried that any of the more delicate situations in the former Yugoslavia, places like Bosnia, and as you described, a very delicate kind of complex set of agreements that were kind of meant to freeze everything. Are you worried about a reignition? Kind of like a place like Cyprus or anywhere where there's sort of this tenuous sort of frozen situation. Are you worried about any kind of reignition there, or is there more of a view that well, this is kind of like an older generation's thing, and we kind of are all sort of gonna accept the status quo and whatnot?
Yeah, no, there have been some with Bosnia, with the Serbian Republika Srpska, the president is kind of pretending like he's kind of rejecting the whole Dayton Peace Accord. So there is some tension there, though you don't really feel that on the ground. I mean, there's a lot of discussion on the news, like what's going to happen, but it's just like, okay, the clowns are at it again. It's just like, there's still this passivity, like whatever will happen. Like, no, but I don't know. But yeah, it is a concern, of course. Like, it's just
Mm.
part of this bigger geopolitical game, and it could definitely affect the Balkans.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Um,
it's kind of like there's a like Korean adage, when the whales fight, the shrimp breaks its back, because Korea's always been like pretty small, stuck in between like larger forces. So yeah, there's a lot of that there. It sounds like sort of
exactly.
that kind of drives the passivity.
Exactly, for sure. Yeah.
Hmm.
I think that the Balkans was just like banana republics. It's just and that's why Yugoslavia was such a great state, is because only by uniting could they actually be a real country. Like,
Mhm.
so
Um,
I don't know.
oh, go ahead.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
go ahead.
So you left America around like 2016-ish, right? Like the Bernie Sanders campaign?
Originally, yeah, I went to Estonia for a couple years, but I went back to the States in 2020 just because Bernie was going to run again, and so I volunteered. But after that, I had no reason to stay in the States, so I just left, and I went to Turkey. That was during the COVID pandemic, and so I was staying with a friend in Turkey for about 8 months, and then I started traveling, and I came through the Balkans, and yeah, I ended up coming back here the next summer, and yeah, it just so happened that I bought the laundry, and
Okay. Do you like regret your choice moving out of America, or like is it like one of the best choices you've ever made, especially seeing where American politics are now and how it's sort of devolved into the situation we're in now. And especially like is everybody just looking at America right now, like from an outsider's perspective? I bet it's insane. I mean, to some extent, I think within America we've sort of normalized everything that's going on. To an extent, it happens when you're like living in a society, especially when like the rug is being pulled out from under you. But to an outsider's perspective, I think this must look insane, right? Or is it just America being America?
no, I think this is pretty crazy. Yeah, I would agree with that, and it's looking like it was wise to kind of set myself up outside of the country. Like, I don't know, I just didn't feel like there was anything left for me. Like, the cost of living has become so astronomical. Like, so yeah, I don't regret leaving at all. Like, it's
Mm.
nice that I can, just be able to support myself abroad and not be dependent on the dollar, which is going down. What else? Yeah,
Huh.
but yeah, I'm sure it's I would imagine that people are watching America with thinking it's yeah, pretty crazy what's happening.
Do you see America discussed at all in like Bosnia, like our modern day politics? What's going on under Trump, or is it just sort of like not a topic whatsoever?
Well, I mean, I go upstairs, the news is always on, and they're always talking about American politics, like, so it is definitely a topic of conversation, though I can't always understand what the conversation is, but people, yeah.
Okay,
Mm.
interesting. Um, yeah, I mean, it's it seems like Bosnia is sort of a viewer in politics. I mean, especially after the what was it called, the Accords? The
Yeah,
it,
Dayton Accords, yeah.
yeah, Accords. It's sort of a passive viewer of politics. And it's only recently sort of become politically surcharged, especially with the Palestine movement. Do you think that's like partly because of the Islamic influence within Bosnia? Because it's like seeing other Muslims get killed has sort of across the world. It's sort of charged them to become politically active, or do you think it's sort of part of like a deeper unrest towards, especially you know it reflects a deeper unrest, especially towards capitalist restoration in the area and like grievances with that they're not able to connect with through their sort of negative class consciousness.
No, I think the Muslim solidarity is a big part of it. Um, and the whole genocide is still a big trauma for them in their own history. So they're seeing the genocide of the Palestinians and feeling like they can relate to it, which can be a bit uncomfortable because it's like you're kind of centering your own trauma in some way. But I don't know. I wouldn't say it's like some anti-capitalist unrest, because it's very the symbolism of the protest is very Islamic. You don't see any like hammers and sickles or anything like that. Uh,
Mm.
Unfortunately, I would love to just like, but I've even heard that they've banned that kind of like the people that are organizing the protests are like some religious organization of some sort. I don't know the specifics, but I've heard that they would not take nicely to like having communist symbolism at the protest. So
Mm.
yeah, that's
But it probably ultimately drives people towards like more, a more critical view of like the Western kind of capitalist order, right?
yeah, for sure. I mean, just to lose your illusions that Biden was the, great hero. I think that definitely that's a good starting point, right?
Do you find yourself seeing people often seeking like a third way, like between capitalism and socialism? Like to them, socialism's a failure, and then like capitalism obviously doesn't work, or like is it very like hustle culture defined, like people who are super entrenched within capitalism, especially the younger generations that you're talking about, who didn't grow up in Yugoslavia and don't have a nostalgia for it. Do they sort of like view it like, damn, I just got to get enough elbow grease, and I just got to put in enough hustle. I just got to wake up at 4 a.m. and I can become like a multimillionaire. Are they in that mindset, or are they seeking an alternative between communism and capitalism through like anarchist things, or like pseudo fascist things, or like some third identity ideology that doesn't even exist, or like they're trying to invent it on the spot?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I just feel like the general ideal is to make a lot of money without doing any work. That's kind of what the mythology is, the capitalist mythology. So I don't see a lot of people organizing to try to like create a third option of some sort. I mean, I don't know how I would observe that or measure that in any way. Like, but I don't know. Like, the what I'm trying to model and what I'm trying to show is like a worker ownership model of business. Even if I'm just one person, I'm still the worker who owns the means of production, um, which was really the Titoist worker self-management model that they used here. I don't know if there's any other cooperatives or anything like that going on. Maybe more family-run businesses. I don't know. Like, I don't really see a lot of like what would be a third way? I don't know, like Sweden or something, like social democracy. I don't know. Not sure how to answer that.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I think that is a problem within the American left. Like a lot of people don't like communism or capitalism, and they want to seek like a third way, and it's often, yeah, like you said, the Swedish model or anarchism. I suppose within Bosnia they're much more in tune with this capitalist mythology. Um
It's
do
probably going to increasingly become China too.
oh yeah, yeah, they might look towards China as a model, huh?
It
Yeah.
might, yeah. The problem is that like people are so poor here that they can't really travel. They can't. I think that's part of the reason why there's a lack of consciousness. Is just because it's a very poor country, and yeah, they can't really go to like faraway places. So that's unfortunate.
Mm.
It also makes them more kind of insular, just closed minded. But I mean, you can't blame them too much for that.
About the older people you've talked to, like what did they miss about Yugoslavia the most? Like was it the healthcare, or was it like the system? Was it even like just this general sense of community that no longer exists?
Yeah, like the slogan was brotherhood and unity. And I don't know, I think it was more than just a slogan. Like, people really had solidarity. They, like, it didn't matter what your religion was. And I think that kind of sense of, and also having a place in the world, like that Yugoslavia really was a real country. It really had a pretty big influence in the world and geopolitics, and people were very proud of that. And they were proud of Tito. Um, yeah, I don't know. Their life was pretty good. They had like paid vacations and healthcare, and yeah, I think Bosnia tends to be pretty positive towards Tito, like because
Mm.
in Bosnia, like he developed socialist Yugoslavia industrialized Bosnia. Like before, it used to be just rural and very uneducated, and so yeah, he brought a lot of development to Bosnia.
And
I
the
don't
breakup
know.
was so destructive for Bosnia.
It was, yeah, it was very traumatic for. So
Mm.
I don't know if there's the question. Yeah.
No, it did. One thing I find fascinating is that everybody within the region, like, they do miss Yugoslavia. We had this brotherhood and et cetera, et cetera. But also they have to sort of contend with nationalism breaking it up. And nationalism is almost treated as this like supernatural force that was just inevitably gonna break up Yugoslavia, right? Or that we now inevitably have to deal with this now. And we have to fall into nationalism now. Um what obviously the national question has always sort of been like a problem for communists. We've always sort of had to grip with it. Like, how much do we give to nationalism? How much do we throw away from nationalism? How much do we try to strive for that classless, moneyless society where there are no nations? We've always sort of had to grip with that concept. Living in this area of the world, like Bosnia, and then you've traveled around the Balkans a little bit. How has that shaped your views on nationalism? Like, is it a useful tool? Is it completely reactionary? Is there anything good about it? Because especially in how it's caused the breakup of Yugoslavia, I'm just curious, how do you view nationalism after having experienced this region?
I mean, my view is that we should be international workers first and foremost, but that doesn't mean we should be anti-nation or, want to impose one single culture on the world or something like. And I think like for Bosnians, for example, there was always a big question, the Bosnian question, are they Serbians who became Muslims? Were they Croatians who became Muslims? And Tito, for the first time, recognized them just as Muslims, as a separate ethnicity. So I think that was very positive for them. I think that's one reason why Tito is still loved here, because he showed that no, you're neither Croats or Serbs, but you are your own separate nationality. So on the census, I think 1974, that was so that's I would say that was a positive thing. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, we have to realize that as workers, as the working class, we are, because the capitalist class is international. Like the capitalist class has no nationality. They have no national loyalty. They have no patriotism. They just so the only way for us as workers to fight the capitalists is for us to come together. The workers of the world unite. So yeah, I don't know. You have to balance both of them, internationalism, but also recognize you don't want to oppress. You don't want to be the prison house of nations. Like,
It must be a hard balancing, and I know Tito was able to balance it expertly, and it sort of fell after his death. Like, you have to give a little bit of concessions to nations because obviously, just because we communists see that nationalities are like results of capitalist interest, or like a national bourgeois identity, doesn't mean that ethnicities and nationalities go away overnight because we will them away to. Um, but also, I think to some extent, it's a double edged sword because it did lead to the breakup of Yugoslavia. And so I don't know. It's such a struggle. I find that a lot of communists within the West sort of fail on the nationalism issue, because they've sort of in their minds they've already solved the nationalism issue, right? Like, yeah, nations are stupid, blah blah blah. We shouldn't be fighting for a nation, and then they expect everybody else in the world who's not a communist and just nationalities who are oppressed to solve it. Like, oh, the Palestinians should just get over their fight with Israel, and they should work with Israeli workers, or the Ukrainians and Russians should just get over their ethnic conflict. And of course, I'm not comparing, Israel's genocide to like the Russo-Ukrainian war. But they expect the rest of the world to solve nationalism because they've already solved nationalism in their head. But uh,
Yeah.
it's such a dangerous, it's such a dangerous thing to fall into. I think either way, really, either tendency.
Yeah, it can be. Exactly. You have to find a right balance between the two. Like, yeah, like the funny thing in the Balkans is that like a Serbian, a Croatian, and a Bosnian Muslim, a Bosniak is that's their national identity, is a Bosniak. But everything, their language, ethnically, is the same. Like, but because of nationalism, there's a lot of kind of pseudoscience. I don't know, just a lot of looking into like the medieval past and like, yeah, like building a statue to like some king from the 1300s or something, and like, and at the same time denying Tito, like, even though that's within living memory, they feel more connected to some king in the 1300s than with Tito. So
Hmm.
what was I getting at? I was
Yeah.
gonna make a point.
Henry,
But
did you have something to say?
I wanted to see if you were going to finish, but I was going to say I got quite into Ethiopian politics a while ago, and with especially online, and primarily as an observer. But yeah, you see in a lot of countries like this very aggressive kind of you know inheritance oriented, kind of almost like lineage oriented view of like, well, these people came here, they did this to us, that's why we're doing this to them. And that, where it gets to all of this, well, they found this they pour over every archaeological site and what it means, and when and really really oversimplify the reasons why people came to have like separate ethnic identities, or and over and don't understand like just how complex all that history is, in favor of these clear cut kind of, maybe more, you could say, us versus them mentalities. And you could say there's a human kind of nature problem there or whatever, but it feels like a lot of the time you see that most aggressively in countries where there are poor material conditions, and the bourgeoisie is able to convince ethnic groups that, well, the people screwing you over isn't really us, it's them over there. But then you also have kind of remarkable cases like for all of the immense problems, a country like India, which is remarkably pluralistic, as a very large country, or even or Spain, like, which has struggled a lot over time, but now has this autonomous kind of setup for all these different ethnic groups and languages. And so it seems like material conditions definitely play a role there, but also like the political framework and how you give people autonomy and not exploit their resources, and so on. Do you think it's a balance between those two things, kind of elevated material conditions and uh, national right to self-determination?
For sure, yeah. I mean, if you compare like the first Yugoslavian kingdom to Tito's Yugoslavian kingdom, the difference is that socialism actually delivered. It actually improved people's material conditions. And that's why it worked a lot better than the first kingdom. The first kingdom had a lot of national oppression, a lot of like exploitation, and But socialist Yugoslavia really improved life for everybody, and people were really getting along. Like you had in Sarajevo, you had a lot of mixed marriages. Like something like 30% of marriages were mixed between parents of different religions. So that just kind of shows how it didn't really matter anymore. Like the Yugoslavian identity kind of came first. Like, yeah. So you have to improve people's material conditions and only socialism can do that. Like,
Mhm.
Mm. These kings that they sort of like see as like a unifying figure. Instead of Tito, why do you think they skip over Tito? Like, why is Tito so controversial to them when he did improve material conditions?
that's a really good question. I mean, there's just this kind of taboo, it's like there's always some taboo. Like I think in socialist Yugoslavia, it was taboo to be religious. It wasn't illegal to be religious, but it was just like that would be a threat to the unity of our people. And so today, because the national idea is so prevalent, they know that Tito would not be happy with it. And like they just don't want to. I think he would be so disappointed by the way things have turned out. And yeah, yeah, I just think it's because of the nationalism
Mm,
and like the idea, this myth that socialism equals atheism. Uh,
mm. I especially imagine in Bosnia, which is a Muslim majority country, which is so rare in Europe, especially. I imagine
yeah,
that atheism sort of association is really it's really impactful in terms of their views of Tito and the Yugoslav experiment.
yeah, definitely. But it's also the way in the Balkans that religion and ethnicity religion and nationality are so connected. I don't think you quite see that as strongly anywhere else. Like like I said, the only difference between a Croat, a Serb, and a Bosniak is religion. They speak the same language. They really should. You could make the case that they are one nation, but yeah. Um, so that's why religion is so salient here.
Mm,
It's a view of religion that's very tinged with nationalism. It's very.
Um,
It's kind of closer to like what you see in some South Asian countries,
Could you elaborate? Like,
or like in Sri Lanka, or
yeah,
like in Bangladesh.
yeah. There's a. I would imagine so. Yeah.
yeah, I was gonna say it sounds a lot like India. It really does. Like, uh, r- similar ethnic groups and languages, but religion is the main difference. I mean, that's basically Punjab and Pakistan, or that's so many
Yeah,
areas
yeah, yeah.
in South Asia, really. Um,
Right.
yeah, I've always sort of said that South Asia is, anyways, the Balkans of Asia. So I don't know. It's very similar. Um, this Balkan infighting, right? Like that's such a huge meme. The hatred towards each other. Have you actually seen that, like in real life, like Bosnians talking shits about Croats or anybody else, or is it overemphasized?
Huh. I mean, I don't really see anything like on the ground. I don't feel ethnic tension in any way. Like you still have like you still have the churches and everything here, but I don't know, you do see, I guess in the graffiti, maybe that's one place where you will see like Ratko Mladic. I don't know if you know, he was this general who did the Srebrenica massacre, and if you go to like some of the Serbian areas, you'll see like graffiti of him, like portraits of him, like murals of him, and it will say hero, like, and that's extremely provocative. Like, it's really unnecessary. Like, but other than that, I haven't seen like, I don't know, violence or anything. But
Mm.
maybe it's there below the surface. Yeah,
So what
it's
you're
hard to
saying
measure these
basic
things. Yeah.
what you're saying basically, talk more shit on Facebook and online than in real life. Like, once you're,
Oh yeah, yeah.
you know.
Don't go to the comment section. Yeah, then you'll.
I think that's the very odd thing about internet culture is like people will be willing to say shit online, but once they're face to face with somebody, it's a lot of it disappears. Only the most like emboldened racists or bigots really have the courage to say it in real life. I think, and to some extent,
Yeah.
I think it's manufactured online. Like, I don't really think that when they're hating, I don't know, Albanians or I don't know, whoever, whenever they're doing this ethnic conflict, like it's genuine to some extent. It really is just internet culture. And if they're in a room with an Albanian, they'll be nice to them. Otherwise, I mean, I don't know. It,
Or just like with a lot of situations like that, the diasporas are like the most like aggrieved, and like inflammatory, but people that actually have to like live next to each other are more pragmatic.
That's
mm,
for sure. Yeah.
mm,
So in the diaspora communities, you'll have like Yugoslavian events where, like in Germany, different Serbians and Bosnians will get together and like so. Yeah, I mean, I would say the general rule is that people don't want conflict. It does feel like it's very manufactured and like people are kind of dragged into it against their will.
Do people really see a future in the region? Like, do they really see themselves building a future within the Balkans itself, or are they sort of always dreaming about moving, like migrating to the West for a better life?
A lot of people are really want to get out of here, unfortunately. And it feels like the most intelligent people have left the country. I might get some shit for saying that, but like, um,
Like a brain.
yeah, I don't know. The feeling there is a feeling that whatever the states and peace accord, it's really not sustainable forever. Like it's just I would say there's pessimism about the future where people just kind of don't want to even think about it.
Mm. And like an apathy, huh? Right. Uh,
Yeah, there's a lot of apathy. Yeah.
mm. You were a Bernie Sanders supporter, and then you volunteered in this 2020 campaign. And we've seen a lot of people sort of become radicalized, especially through the Bernie Sanders campaign. Like, could you describe that political process? Like, why was Bernie Sanders so catalyzing for you towards like radicalizing you?
Yeah, I mean in 2016 I was in the States. I was getting my master's degree and when that was in 2016, the summer when Bernie started running, and it's just he was just such common sense. Of course, we need to reform our healthcare system. It's so like it's just such obvious solutions. Like, but then I noticed all my classmates were really into Hillary, and I'm like, wait, what? Like, why are you? So it just showed me that like, wow, I guess I guess I'm different. I guess I'm not like these other liberals, like. So I think, and then the way that the media started attacking him, and like, you had all the super delegates and everything. It's like, wow, like this is so undemocratic, and like you could just see you could see how somebody like Bernie would never be allowed into the system. But I still had hope that we could like somehow with willpower we could just like, especially when he ran again in 2022 and 2020, that I thought like if we just go like 10 times harder we can like break through the barriers that they've put up for us. But like,
Or
yeah, now I realize that there's nothing that we could have done. Like, really, it's so that I think that started me getting radicalized, like realizing even just like some very modest, like Bernie's not a radical, like he is a very like European centrist, and he's just a social democrat. Like he's not a socialist, he's not a Marxist Leninist or anything. Like, and then yeah, it just like realizing that the system cannot be reformed. Like, and
Yeah.
so if the system can't be reformed, then we have to think about something more international. So I guess that the way that Bernie was like uh treated really just started getting me radicalized, and then I started reading Lenin, and then yeah, It just got more and more radical.
I think that was what part of the Bernie campaign that was so odd to me was that if the rulers of America were smart, they would have let Bernie win, I think, to some extent, because those reforms, I think, would have added some much needed stability to the current American paradigm. And
Yeah.
if you're the ruling class, that would have been wonderful. I mean, it would have gotten the workers' movement off your back, and instead, they've sort of chosen a more accelerationist route where they're going to do like shock therapy under Trump and just take as much as they can while Trump's in office, and then normalize it under the Democrats, obviously. So they've just chosen ultimate class warfare over a more conciliatory policy with Bernie Sanders. And I think partly because there's just no more profits left for redistribution of the loot. Like the profit the tap of capitalism is getting narrower and narrower. Like you can't afford any more reforms, or the bourgeois can't afford any more reforms. Obviously they're making billions and billions. And also I think to some extent they sort of got fat and lazy and nepo baby-ish and greedy to a point where they can't even run the damn country anymore like they used to. Like America used to have logical evil people in charge. I don't think they're logical evil
Yeah.
people anymore. No. Um
Mhm.
and it's odd to me because for a little bit, like if you were listening to Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates, and I don't know how genuine they were backing like things like universal healthcare. So they were admitting that, this could save them, right? This could get the workers off their back for a little bit. But instead they've chosen the more accelerationist Trump. It's odd. I think we're living in like a very nepo baby. I'm evil, yes, but I don't know how to pull the levers of power, and even I believe in my own bullshit sort of ruling class. Whereas like previous ruling classes, they didn't really believe in their own bullshit, right? Like when they said something about American exceptionalism or, something of that sort, they in their shadowy back rooms while they were making their deals, they had like more logical, machinations, and that's sort of gone. They've believed in their own lie now, the people pulling the levers of power. I think Trump is really emblematic of that, where like he believes in American greatness so much that he can somehow through this tariff policy pull America out. I mean, I don't know. It's
And
Yeah.
you see really awesome and hilarious evidence of that decadence in things like that guy Brian Johnson, who wants to live forever and gets like blood transfusions from his son. Like, none of it's scientific, but it's just nonsense. Or the whole obsession with like birth rates and there's not going to be enough, just like total nonsense. Um, and I think there is a lot to that. They've just been stuck in this like echo chamber of like self-aggrandizement. Um, but I think, it's all honestly, I was very, very scared like earlier this year, pretty scared, but the more the year has gone on, it's just been one hilarious like bout of incompetence after another. Like this is not the Stoombook Thailand. They're not like it's like the most disorganized like group of clowns imaginable. So there's a lot to be concerned about for sure, but that kind of like incompetence is going to be really really good.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's oh no, go ahead, Christopher.
I mean, yeah, you're just seeing even the liberals are really becoming like revolutionary. So it's like, yeah, like I don't know the way I see it. Like, yeah, like America is definitely on the decline with the rise of China and everything. And I don't know if there's much we can do about that. But with Trump, it's just like totally accelerating it, like way faster than I thought.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think what they really wanted was a Sawardo, right? Like somebody who could just like sort of Jakarta method American society, but there's they got a very incompetent Mussolini. I think like even Mussolini had like more consistent ideology. He was able to write books. I don't think Trump can write an ideological book, right? Like all he can write is Art of the Deal through like a ghostwriter. And it's just like general, most bare basic business advice that you would get from like a business course or even like a WAPO article or Wall Street article. Um
Yeah, there's a really fascinating book, or it's not really a book. You can find it on JSTOR, but called "The Episodic Man" about Trump, where this psychologist basically argues that whoever he's talking to in a given moment, he just agrees with, and that dictates his behavior until like whoever next, every day he wakes up and just tries to like win and come out on top of the day. And because that he has like very little consistent convictions like Mussolini or other figures did.
Yeah.
And that just turns into the biggest like clownish grifter, administration ever. And we should consider ourselves really lucky that it wasn't actually Mussolini, I think.
I think
Yeah.
we should consider ourselves to some extent lucky, but also to some extent it's scary. I mean, as hilarious as Trump is, I mean, obviously people's lives are being affected like horribly by his incompetence. But if he was competent, I'm sure he would have been able to harm a lot more people's lives. I don't understand really anything about the Trump phenomenon, really. Why he's so attractive to the ruling classes. I think they do have a hesitancy about him, definitely. But for some reason they chose him over and over again, and I think really it's just a wrecking ball. Like Trump is just their wrecking ball, their wild card, because neoliberalism clearly isn't working again and again. And so Trump sort of becomes like I really think he becomes like a reset to the system, right? Like he becomes like a very temporary wrecking ball to all of the issues of neoliberalism that the ruling classes have that are sort of getting in their way of their super profits that they're desiring more and more. And then Democrats can come in and sort of normalize whatever Trump changed. But they don't necessarily like Trump, right? They don't necessarily he's just sort of like their rabid dog, right? Like he's a little bit of an embarrassment for them too, though. Um,
I think it was like, well, the view is like, well, we have Bernie and we have Trump, and clearly these two figures represent major disaffection and demand for change amongst the working class. So we should let them get off some steam, because if Kamala Harris comes in, it's going to be 4 more years of Biden, and people are going to be way more angry after 4 more years. So maybe if we just, have this guy in here who's going to he's going to press all the red buttons, but behind closed doors, he's just going to defer to us. That's what they thought, and they just underestimated how stupid he really is, and how mercurial, like firing people because they're not loyal enough, or doing this and then doing that and contradicting himself. Now he seems like he's going to become, major Ukrainian nationalist after cozying up to Putin. Like I think that all of that really does play into the hands of the working class, though, I think, because the Trump MAGA voters are going to be disillusioned that their conditions aren't getting better, right? It get a lot worse. And the liberals are going to get disillusioned or some of them, because they see how, um, how all of the bad things Trump's are doing, the liberals are ultimately kind of doing. And hopefully there'll be an opportunity there. And like all of these contradictions just are getting out of the hands of the ruling class. And then you also have this divide between tech capital and the kind of West Coast capitalists that really like Trump, and finance capital and Jamie Dimon and these figures that really care about stability and actually prefer the Democrats. And that you can see those two kind of groups of people kind of clashing too. So it doesn't seem like that unified, you know, Nazi Germany, like we're gonna crush the working class movements kind of operation.
yeah, yeah. I think it's to some extent it's because capital operates differently now, especially with the tech valley, Bros. Whereas like in Italy and Germany, they were very it was a very industrial, unified base. I mean, the bourgeois were much more unified back then than they are now, and obviously they still have the same class interests, and obviously they're more unified than we were under they're more unified than the proletariat easily. I mean, obviously, like look at us, we're a mess globally in every sense, but there's just such a difference between the needs of a Soros who pays this podcast. All three of us are paid by George Soros. Yeah. Yeah. But there's such a difference between the needs of George Soros and the needs of an Elon Musk, compared to what the industrialists of Germany needed. And that was the industrialists of Germany were very much more unified behind Hitler than the bourgeois are behind Trump. You worked with the Bernie campaign, Kristopher, and you were interacting with people on the street. like, what was the general sense? What was the general sense towards the Democratic Party? What was the general sense towards Bernie Sanders? What was the general sense towards Trump? I mean,
Mm.
how did they feel about all this bullshit? Did you see any sort of room there for like more radicalization outside of Democratic Party politics, or were people sort of just like, "Oh, like, yeah, if it's not Bernie, I'm gonna go to Kamala and Biden, and I'm gonna fall back into a liberal sort of framework."
Yeah, I mean, I was organizing mostly in California, which tends to be very limousine liberal. So a lot of people were like more towards Elizabeth Warren, and I don't know, like, but I would set up my table on the street and talk to people, and yeah, I mean, yeah, like there was definitely a strong grassroots support for Bernie. Um, yeah, I mean, I wasn't actually working for the campaign. I was doing some Bernie chalking. I don't know if you saw it on like Instagram. I was like writing Bernie and rainbow colors on universities and stuff. So I was trying to be more of a guerrilla activist, and
Nice, nice. Oh,
you know.
campus.
Yeah. You probably
Oh yeah,
are you from there?
yeah. I met you. That's crazy.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah,
Wow. Okay.
yeah. That's crazy. It's crazy that we're
Metal
we're
Rider
here.
people.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
I've
I met you while you were doing it.
wow. Cool. Yeah, I loved how that started conversations, and like, trying to activate the base to actually do something a little more radical, like, because I was just chalking without permission, and just, but so many, it was so like organized top down, like what does the campaign say we should do? We should follow the specific script, and like there wasn't any like spectacle, and it was too much just like, it was very top down, very like, yeah, I wanted to see more radicalism from below. It was disappointing.
Absolutely.
Like guerrilla activism. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I think Bernie Sanders has sort of lost a lot of his steam, and AOC have lost a lot of their steam. I mean, their most recent rally in my city, it was mostly old people, um, and all the young people were in the counter protest for Palestine. And every single Bernie rally and AOC rally that they do in their sort of campaign right now, they get met by cheers of Free Palestine, and the crowd agrees with the Free Palestine crowd. And so
Yeah.
I think really, and it's because Bernie, he had this energy. He had this amazing energy for an alternative to the Democratic Party system, and he just funneled it back into Democrats. And in 2016, I think that was doable to an extent. Like, oh yeah, let's go for Hillary. And then Trump came, and then Biden, it was doable. Okay, you know what, let's go for Biden. But then a third round of taking all of this organic grassroots energy and just sort of wasting it back into the Democrats when they failed the I don't know, you can call them sort of progressive. The progressive people like 3 times. It led a lot of people to become disenfranchised with both Bernie Sanders and also just Democratic Party politics themselves. Like, as much as I think Trump is sort of like, you could argue Trump is like a controlled opposition by the Chinese to accelerate America's destruction. Like, Bernie Sanders to some extent has accidentally been a funnel for Marxist Leninism, Maoism, I don't know, like whatever.
Definitely. Yeah.
It
Even
feels like he's very unfairly criticized and very unfairly praised at the same time.
I agree. Yeah. Like, even if he doesn't personally like support Palestine, I don't know if he doesn't go as far as we would like him to, but I mean, we can still take that and run with it. And you know, I do think he's a net positive. He definitely like turned me into from being like a kind of a liberal to being like questioning things. Like, he radicalized me. I don't just follow whatever Bernie says. Like, I'm not just he can say go vote for Hillary, but I'm not going to. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, I find Bernie, like figures like Bernie and Hassan, so hard to sort of figure out politically because obviously, like from a Marxist Leninist, Maoist perspective, like they're not enough. like in any means, especially Bernie Sanders, like the policies he proposes, they're not enough. And we even have the framework of social fascism, like these people are social fascists. But within the framework of American politics, compared to like let's say German politics or Italian politics, where they during those eras had like such a strong presence of Marxists and communists within parliament, even if they were revisionist, right? Um,
And
th- to some extent, it's different. Like to some extent, the fact that and Hassan are able to break through this illusionment that American politics gives you and like makes socialism an unscary word. As much as I admit his limitations, and we have to admit his limitations, he's also a tool for radicalization. But I don't know how much longer he can remain that, honestly, before he becomes sort of another net back into the Democratic Party.
And people are American society is so individualistic that people really like the idea of finding some beliefs that challenge like the order or whatever. Like like with the YouTuber Bad Empanada. I don't know if you saw, but he basically made some video about how Hassan isn't actually a pipeline and how he's a dead end, and to basically liberalism because he doesn't give people enough of a materialist framework. And all of the comments on the video were like, yeah, I mean, I agree, but I started watching you because of Hassan. Like there is this kind of like undeniable process of like ideological formation. And I guess the internet makes it extremely different too, because people tend to, say, well, maybe they've got some idea, maybe they don't agree with everything, and then they, you know, will find other people through people, and that creates a very different space, for ideology. Do you think like Christopher, I don't know, was there a specific, you mentioned like Bernie being a moment when you moved away from liberalism, but were there any other stops along the way in terms of issues or flashpoints or whatever that pushed you farther, or was it just Bernie and then reading Lenin?
well, I mean, my material conditions, like I have to make money and survive and feed myself. So, like, I think that's ultimately what radicalizes people. So, yeah, I don't know. I could elaborate on that.
Mhm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
it is our material conditions that are getting worse, and we need to find an explanation for it. And ultimately, we're either going to find socialism or we're going to find some false consciousness that says it's like nationalism, or it's like Bosnians. It's like I wish you would read more, but then when I see what they're actually reading, it's like some nationalist stuff. It's like maybe you shouldn't be reading more. Like, you know what I mean?
Stop reading. This is an anti-reading podcast.
I mean, I don't know. It's hard to. And also don't shit talk bad at Banana. We're trying to get up on the pod. No, I'm just kidding.
No,
Um,
no, I do like and I agree, but I was just saying there's sort of an undeniable like you know path, like it's just kind of it's hard to explain,
yeah,
because you could say on the face of it, yeah, Hassan is a dead end, but the reality is also that a lot of people started watching Bad Empanada because of Hassan. But
yeah,
yeah, just to
yeah.
clarify.
I mean, obviously, it's. I was joking. Also, Henry, don't worry about it. Obviously, like it's such a double-edged sword, but like I think Marxist Leninists have always sort of contended, like I've been reading Stalin's collected works, and I haven't gotten that far into it, but he's mentioning within it like the working class through many crises gets taught slowly and slowly how to build revolution. And like that can sometimes look through the lens of a movement that's absolutely gonna fail. Right, so it can be like the Narodniks of Russia, right? There's like very adventurous, peasant commune kind of focused. But what's important about them and these failures is that it trains the working class. And I think to some extent, Bernie Sanders is that failure that's slowly training the American working class. Where yeah, I mean, I don't think Bernie's ever gonna win. I don't think the social democrat or progressive idea is ever gonna win because they're trying a failing strategy. I mean, to reform the Democratic Party through electoralism, to get them to drop campaign donors or some like it's not happening. But it is this failure and attempt is slowly part of the training of the proletarian army. So and Hassan himself, I mean, I think that dude hides his power level. Bernie doesn't. I mean, Bernie doesn't hide his power level at all. And of course, they're different. I mean, one's a Twitch streamer, one's a politician. Um, but Hassan funnels people into this pipeline. And sure, I mean, I'm sure there's a section of there is a point to what Bad Empanada said. Like, there is a section of Hassan's viewers that watch Hassan and stop right at him, and they never go more radical. Like, I met people like that. You know, like I know Hassan watchers who are like, yeah, I mean, I guess the Soviet Union is cool, but I'm still gonna be a Bernie voter, and you know, I'm not gonna go past the Democrats. But a lot of my followers, like a lot of people who watch me, they watch me because they were radicalized through Hassan. You know, like I get accused of being a Hassan clone a lot of times by like liberals, and I think it's an unfair comparison, but it is true that a large part of my radical fan base, or follower base, a large part of Hakeem, a large part of PSL and FRSO, like these really radical parties within America that are slowly gaining steam. A lot of those people were originally Hassan viewers, right? A lot of those people were originally part of the Bernie campaign, and so as Marxist Leninists, like we're having to like obviously social fascism is a thing. Like obviously we have to admit that. But we're having to walk this fine line between the conditions of America where we don't really have this large like social fascism. That theory came about when within European electoral politics, they had very large Marxist parties present within parliament, you know, and they were revisionists. They were part of the Second International, you know, Kautsky, and, you know, we're going to slowly, peacefully transition capitalism into socialism. That was their issue. We don't have that issue. We have a very different issue, and that's no Marxism. No Marxism at all. No class consciousness. And so, to some extent, I think there is a limited utility to the Bernie Sanders and Hassan phenomenon that we cannot discount, really, whatsoever. I mean, it worked with Kristopher, and it's worked with millions of people.
Yeah, it's like I think it gets to one of the big, like one of the larger problems in the American left, especially, which is just like an ignorance of history, and especially an ignorance of how different things really were in those times, and the fact that a lot of the strategies that were used then just don't have a context today. They just don't make any sense at all. For one, you know, there's almost no peasantry left in the world. You know, all kinds of reasons. And so really the lesson to be learned is like the way that people analyzed their contemporary reality. And the way that they did that is important to learn from, but the reality is different.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we have to
Right.
analyze our
Just
conditions.
we have.
Kristopher, go ahead.
I mean, yeah. So for me, Bernie was just a big part of realizing that this whole mythology that we're of a liberal democracy, that ultimately the system is what the voters have chosen. You know, like the way that Bernie was treated just destroyed that whole idea that we are actually in any way a democracy. And I think once you lift the veil on that, then it opens up a lot of well, questions about who actually controls things, and you know, and you can take that in two directions. You can either become a right-wing conspiracy theory, or you can get true consciousness, which is, you know, working class socialist consciousness.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. And it's obviously, as communists, we can't like become consumed within the Bernie Sanders movement. I mean, that would be, I think, dangerous because that would make us fall into reformism. But we have to find a way to approach this movement in which we're able to maintain our radicalism, but also maintain its ability to funnel people into leftism. And I think we've sort of seen the beginnings of that with like during the 2024 campaign. The PSL and the Green Party worked together. Like they said, if you can't vote for the Green Party, vote for PSL in your area. And so like people who were tired that Bernie got outed, um, and were moving towards third party politics, they were able to find this, you know, sort of union between these two groups, this common united front, and that allowed them to slowly search up what Marxist Leninism is and things like that. I don't know. It's a hard question to answer. Like, where do we draw the line between being consumed by the Bernie movement and also allowing it to continue to radicalize Americans? Because it's such a gift in the lap of communists that um if we throw it away, I mean, I think it would be dangerous, right? Bernie Sanders and Hassan, they represent uh aspects of radicalization that I think benefit us more than harm us. And if we throw them away completely, it would be dangerous. But as much as that, like we can't also like allow Bernie Sanders and AOC to like, I don't know, like vote for anti-Semitism bills or, falter on the Palestine issue or, things like that. Um, if you guys understand what I'm trying to say.
Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah.
it's a fine line too, where like you have to say like, well, they're upholding the status quo in these ways, and you know, y- like they like it is helpful to engage with them. Whereas for a lot of like maybe you could say like the left wing of liberalism or whatever, you're gonna come out and say like, well, Bernie Sanders is basically like Donald Trump or whatever. They're gonna be like, okay, these people are just like pretty isolated, and are pretty just want to have like this scientifically constructed like right opinion and just have the satisfaction of having that, like that's an image you don't want to project. So it's a tough balance for sure that you control of the narrative, but also um not not just come across as overly annoying, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess we could just spam images of Lenin all over the internet, say like, so Bernie Sanders lost. Where did that lead you? I think that could work, possibly. Yeah. Um, Christopher, thank you so much for coming on the pod. Where do you see your business and yourself in like 10, 5 years? Do you still see yourself in Bosnia? Do you see yourself expanding?
Yeah, that's hard to say. You know, it was such a bureaucratic process for me to open this business. Like after 3 years, I finally kind of worked through all the paperwork. Cause so now that I've got it established, like I'm pretty invested in it, but at the same time, I feel like I'm just kind of taking it year by year. So I'll reevaluate at the end of the year and I don't know, see how it goes. And I mean, yeah, I feel like it's making a difference, you know. I feel like it's part of that pipeline, you know. I'm talking to people, I'm engaging with people. And I have some skills with that because I did so much Bernie tabling and so yeah, we'll see how it goes, I guess. But 10 years seems like such a long I can't imagine like hard to imagine that I'll still be doing this in 10 years, but I hope so, yeah.
So you sort of feel like a Bosnian Bernie Sanders in a way.
What do you mean?
A Bernie Sanders within Bosnia, like you help people on their political journey to become like a little bit more radicalized.
Sure, I mean, isn't this is all of our jobs as leftists, isn't it, to like educate people and to talk to people? Like I would hope that that's what we're supposed to be doing, right? Is growing the left and building class consciousness. And
Yeah,
but
yeah,
yeah, yeah. At the same time, I have to be making some money. It's like I have to. I am a business, but like hopefully you can make money and also raise consciousness at the same time. That's the sweet spot. Like
yeah. I mean, I think that's what is the problem though. Like you were saying, it's our job as leftists to educate people, or at least you were saying like you hope so. But I don't think a lot of leftists see that as their job. I think they sort of have, especially within westernized culture and individualized culture, they have a very sort of apathy towards the working class. Um,
yeah,
Or even like a gatekeeping of what they think.
Yeah, a
sure.
gatekeeping culture. I mean, it's sort of like, communists before, like whenever they fucked up, or like the fascists won or something of that sort, they would blame themselves. Like, where did we go wrong? But nowadays it's sort of like blamed as like a issue of the working class. It's the working class's fault that they're not communists and that they're not going towards leftist ideas. It's not an issue on our part. I think that might be like an internalization of liberal Western culture. I don't know. It's hard to say. Uh, but what really, I don't know, fascinates me about you know this leftist sort of super individualism is like how do you expect to make any cross roads? Like how do you even expect your ideas to win? And to some extent, I don't think they want their ideas to win. And you'll have like theories like, I don't know, the settlertariat or the labor aristocracy. And they're great theories. I mean, I'm not denying that they aren't true to an aspect, but they're used to sort of justify this idea that of complacency within by some. I mean, obviously not everybody. I mean, I should be nuanced that a lot of people do use these theories to identify a very real problem and work around it or work with it. But some people use these ideas to sort of justify complacency and not doing anything. The Western working class is doomed. It's never going to be class conscious. It's not incentivized to be class conscious. So we should just rely on the third world to do revolution. And we should just sit around and do nothing. It sort of becomes its own sort of defeatism. And so like when you're saying it's our job to educate people, I think you're representing something that is radically needed within our left.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it feels so small, It's like I'm just talking to like people, but they come here and I see that they're inspired, and like I think if we're all doing a little something then it's gonna make a difference. So I hope I can be a part of that. Yeah.
Absolutely. I gotta go to an event in about 6 minutes. Kristopher, thank you so much for coming on. Tell the people where they can find you, Henry. This is the beginning of you being the co-host of this podcast. Tell the people where they can find you. Kristopher, go first.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I also want to thank you for like for the TikTok that you made of me, because like somebody came in. It was only my first year, and somebody came in and they said, "Oh, I saw you on TikTok," and I'm like, "What do you mean?" And then I found your video, and it was so heartening for me. Like, so yeah, you can find me on Instagram at Tito's Iron Fist, one word _ I'm just doing a lot of agitprop on Instagram, and that's the main place, I think. Or you can come in person, like if you're traveling in Europe, I would love to invite you here. We could continue the conversation.
Absolutely. Where is your shop located?
It's in Sarajevo in Bosnia. It's got a great location because it's right by the center of the old town. There's like a fountain that's like the symbol of Sarajevo, and that's just across the street from me. So yeah, it's better just to look on Google Maps and you'll find Tito's Iron Fist. And because I'm a little bit hidden away, I'm kind of in a building. So usually people don't really find me spontaneously. They have to be looking for me, unfortunately, which might be a good thing. It might not be so good to be like right on the street. I might be getting some unwanted attention. So, but yeah, if you want to, you can find me.
Absolutely. Henry, new co-host of the podcast. Where can people find you?
Yeah, it's just Henry with an I, Henry Martel on Substack. Gonna be trying to post a lot more there, but I just published a bunch of essays, mostly about obviously leftist politics, but also history, philosophy in general, and various things of that nature.
All right. All right. You guys have a good one. Oh, I'm late. Okay. You guys have a good one. Thank you so much for coming on. This has been a really fun conversation. All right. Bye.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure.
Hey, thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care.
Okay.
This episode of the Pokepreet Pod has been brought to you by our generous members on our Patreon. If you'd like to become one of them, go to patreon.com/thepokepreetpod. Thank you. What the fuck? Glory to Stalin. I barely made it. And a special shout out to our Marshal of the Soviet Union member, Matthias T. If you'd also like a shout out, please consider subscribing to our Patreon, where you can also get episodes up to a month early. Thank you.